Hey guys, it's Graham, God's mightiest trucker and the most hated man in the LitRPG community on YouTube. They hated Graham because he spoke the truth. But anyway, someone in the comments on my now epic, legendary anti-LitRPG rant of 2023 recommended her own book. Her name was Erin Ampersand, which I really have my fingers crossed is a pen name. The book was called Apocalypse Parenting. She recommended her own book in the comments. And out of the books that have been recommended, it's one of the few that I bookmarked. Is okay, I'll give this one a look. It seems like it's something that I could, at the very least, relate to. A lit RPG situation happens, and all of a sudden, you've got to survive an apocalypse while also being a mom to 3 young kids. So I bookmarked it, finally grabbed it this month, listened to it this week, and let's get into it without too much preamble. So, what's the premise? Well, I just said it's semi-similar to Dungeon Crawler Carl in the sense that there are aliens who impose a role-playing game on the entire world as a way of, I don't know, pleasing themselves for entertainment. There's not so much the Hunger Games audience interaction element of it. They know that they're being watched, the participants in the game, but there's not like, hey, prep and smile for the camera and earn points from the audience and all of that. Our main character is a woman in her late 20s, early 30s. I'm going to guess early 30s. Mother of 3, 2 boys and a little girl, 9, 6, and 3 years old. Her husband is away on a business trip. They live in Alabama. He's in Colorado. When all of a sudden this thing hits, this alien apocalypse hits, and one key feature of it is that all of a sudden anything electronic or combustible doesn't work. That immediately limits communication options, transportation options, and defense options, because you can't call anybody, you can't drive, and you can't shoot a gun. You even have a hard time getting an actual fire started. So, and then everybody gets the interface and they get the stat sheets, and they know that monsters are going to be popping up soon, and it's either you play the game or you die. That's the story of it. And from there, Megan, our protagonist, she's got to figure out this new paradigm and take care of her kids. And if you've got children under 10, you know what you're up against there. And also you coordinate with her neighbors now that the internet is down and you can't check blogs, you can't check neighborhood watch pages. You've actually got to go outside, but that's dangerous because there are monsters. The characters, I think, were generally pretty good. Megan was a believable suburban mom. She was likable, but she had flaws that the flaws themselves were not likable. In fact, they kind of make you cringe a little bit, but let's just be real. If you were in between somebody's ears and saw their inside thought, you might cringe a little bit too, just like you wouldn't want everybody to see what goes on in your head. She has some panic moments, and she gets a little bit cussy sometimes, and that's nothing that I'm super a fan of, but at least restrained and defensible under the circumstances, because, hey, in this situation, you probably would pop off with a couple of $2 words yourself. Her kids, Micah, Cassie, and what the heck was the oldest boy's name? I've already screwed this up. Gavin. Maybe Micah was the oldest and Gavin was the middle kid. The problem was that as I was reading this, because my own kids are kind of similar in age and breakdown, the narrator would say the kids' names, but my brain would automatically edit my own children's names in. Yeah, there were some similarities that kept setting me off. I'm like, yep. Like when the game first started and the interface popped up and it starts telling you like, hey, choose an ability. It's written first person. And so like Megan is doing something at home, some home repair with a power tool. And then all of a sudden all the power tools and stuff stop working. And she gets this interface in her head that's like, hey, you got to pick an ability. While she's trying to figure out what this is, all the kids are also getting the interface pop up and they're saying, Mom, what the heck is this? And she goes, don't pick anything. Don't do anything. Let mommy figure this out. Next thing you know, her 3-year-old daughter comes walking in the room, and suddenly her favorite plushie turtle doll has sentience, is an AI, because she picked an ability and wished for her turtle to be able to talk to her. And I was just like, yep. It's like being a dad and watching A Quiet Place. Like, oh, they can't make any noise at all. They can't pick fights. They can't play with loud toys. Well, I know my son's going to kill my entire family in like 30 seconds, so I'm definitely not making it as far as John Krasinski did in this movie. The parenting element of it was very real and very authentic and hyper relatable if you've also got young children at home. There were a couple of parts where I rolled my eyes at how do I describe this? So, you know those stories that people used to tell on the internet, oh, I stood up for this and I did this even though this person was being mean to me, and then everybody clapped on the whole bus or whatever. They're just little pieces of fiction meant to aggrandize one's own worldview and try to garner hype points from other people for themselves. The version of that takes place in novels is just the author's own perceptions of negative stereotypes against certain people and then just presenting that in a very easy straw man, knock it down kind of way. As Megan's going around the neighborhood and trying to make contact with people, there are a couple of instances where older white men are just trying to boss her around and give her orders and take charge of the situation. And she's like, no, you don't get to make choices for my family. I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm not saying that it's impossible. I'm just saying that it's that annoying thing that's been presented way, way too much in fiction for the last, I don't know, way too damn long. And when they do finally get the neighborhood together in a public place, when they realize, like, oh, well, we don't have any contact with the government, so we must be under martial law, and since I'm a veteran, I must be in charge, and we'll stay by here until we're rescued by the United States military, because the United States military is the most powerful fighting force in the history of the world. And Megan's like, well, what if they don't? Are you saying that you doubt the might of the United States military? It's like, oh my gosh. Okay, like lay it on a little bit thinner, right? Like that's a little bit heavy-handed. However, not only does this book take place in the Deep South, it takes place in a suburban quadrant of the Deep South. Specifically, it takes place in Huntsville, Alabama. And my ears did perk up when the name of that town was mentioned, because many moons ago, a younger and had more hair version of Graham had an ex-girlfriend from Huntsville, Alabama. All I'm going to say is that this particular depiction is plausible. But I digress. So as the story's progressing, and they're figuring out how to navigate the game and how to get food and which abilities to draw and stuff, there is the typical stat analysis and leveling element of a LitRPG. And even though there are regular check-ins on the stat sheet, it wasn't so overdone as to be distracting. And usually when they looked at the stat sheet, it was because they were trying to strategize their next move. I mean, even if you took out the LitRPG element of it and just made this an apocalypse story, they would be doing the same thing. As I got closer to the end, I kind of realized that. I was like, you could take this out of the whole LitRPG realm. Take out the stat sheets and stuff and just have monsters popping up. And this could be an apocalyptic scenario where certain members of the neighborhood trust each other and you find out new challenges and you got to do certain things to survive and all of that. Like, it was an apocalypse novel first, and not just some, like, well, let's stretch the definition of LitRPG to put this under the umbrella. No, it definitely was a LitRPG. It just satisfied the other requirements of competent storytelling. There was a nice climax at the end. Megan was challenged. You weren't just like watching somebody walk you through an RPG alongside their character. Like, this worked as a story. The characters worked as characters. They were credible. They were real people. And even though I was kind of sitting on the fence and thinking, like, yeah, this is probably a 3-star book, like a good 3-star book, by the time it was all said and done, I was like, okay, the way this ended and what the main character, what Megan goes through at the end, I'm like, all right, I think I could give this 4 stars. It might be a slight stretch, but I wouldn't feel uncomfortable giving it 4 stars. One of the special difficulties that she has is knowing that her husband is several states away in a world where suddenly there are no electronics to call, rapid transportation is non-existent, and between Colorado and Alabama, there must be thousands of monsters, and she's got no way of knowing if he's even alive, let alone if, when, and how he can come back. And she's got to not only consider that, but also assuage the fears of her children who miss their daddy in a time like this. So I think it was all depicted very well, especially considering not just the genre, but the subject matter, and how in the hands of a less adept author, this type of story and this cast of characters could have very easily gone wrong and gone in the other direction. There were a couple of times when I feared that it might, but Erin Ampersand, which is probably definitely a real name for a real person, all joking aside, did her job well. I would probably read a sequel to this. I'm not going to run out and grab it. I'm not itching to, but She did well enough that I wouldn't mind reading a sequel down the road. So, to all of you LitRPG types who have published and put something together, drop a comment, recommend something to me. If it's yours, recommend it to me. I will look into it. I do not guarantee that I will buy it or read it, but that's what happened here. She plugged her own book. I spent a credit of my own money, and that way you're getting an honest opinion. Graham is not the Access Media. You cannot buy access to Graham. You can buy things for Graham, but if your book sucks, Graham will still tell you that your book sucks. This book didn't suck. There were a couple of little parts here and there where I groaned inwardly, sensibly, tastefully even, but groaned nonetheless. Final note, content warning, there were probably like 5 or 6 F-bombs throughout the whole thing. Kind of hit the ears like an ice pick, just because, like, hey, you're a mom, you got kids around. But I think it was meant to be an appropriate response to the situation. There weren't any bedroom scenes. There was some talk of it, but it was, again, like within the context of the world. But I won't give anything away on that front. Yeah, just be aware. There's plenty of language. It's not overabundant, but it's there, and it goes all the way up to the F -- word. But that is my review of what the hell is this? Apocalypse Parenting, Book 1, Time to Play. Y'all drive safe. See you out there.